Welcome to Revenge with Joanne. Tell me in the comments which country and city you're from. My name is Dana Reynolds. I'm 34, and I run a small operation called Reynolds Systems LLC. I'm not someone you'd recognize if we crossed paths. I don't do meetings, handshakes, or office politics. I live entirely in the background. That's where I work best. For the last 2 years, I've been a mechanical consultant, operating quietly from my home office. My sole client during that time was Milner Freight, a mid-sized logistics company. I wasn't on payroll. I didn't have an employee badge, no HR login, no internal email. I wasn't staff. I was a vendor, a line item on a spreadsheet. But the system I built for them was the brain of their entire distribution warehouse. Every moving part depended on it. I designed it from nothing: conveyor automation logic, inventory routing, RFID synchronization, error handling, load balancing, all of it. The warehouse staff didn't care how it worked as long as it did, and for 2 straight years, it did, perfectly. I got the contract through Lisa, the operations director at the time. She'd been desperate. Milner's warehouse was bleeding efficiency. Constant crashes, scanners losing sync, pallets disappearing in the system, orders bouncing to the wrong docks. It was chaos. A consultant she trusted mentioned my name, and Lisa called me directly. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I told her their in-house wiring was a Frankenstein mess, built on outdated logic and quick fixes. It couldn't scale. I proposed something radical: an external control layer hosted entirely off-site. No more tangled wiring through the building, no more internal patches. I'd build the system from the ground up and host the logic at my own facility. They'd access it through clean dashboards and handheld interfaces. No downtime, no guessing, just results. Lisa didn't hesitate. She said she didn't care how it worked, as long as it worked. She signed the contract immediately. She didn't study the fine print. She didn't need to. To her, I was just a problem solver, not a risk. Section 2.3 spelled it out clearly. All controller logic, physical routing interfaces, and embedded protocols remained property of Reynolds Systems LLC, unless reassigned in writing after a full buyout. I wasn't planning anything shady. I just needed the freedom to do the job right. I built everything myself. Every line of code, every circuit configuration, every failsafe. The logic boards stayed at my facility. Milner got access, not ownership. For 2 years, the system never went down, not once. No crashes, no lost packages, no late shipments. The workers clocked in, grabbed their scanners, and everything synced automatically. Orders flowed, conveyors moved. It ran like clockwork. Nobody asked questions because there were no problems. And then Hunter McKendry arrived. Hunter was fresh out of grad school with an MBA and a confidence that hadn't yet been tested by reality. Shiny watch, tailored suit, polished smile. He came in as Director of Process Integrity, which was corporate speak for cutting costs. He didn't understand the system. He didn't try to. He saw numbers, not infrastructure. When he noticed my monthly invoice, he zeroed in on it immediately. "Why are we leasing conveyor controls we already own?" he asked, like he'd uncovered something brilliant. I wasn't worried at first. I had a contract, I had performance records, and I knew what he didn't. That system wasn't something you could poke at without consequences. Within a week, he started auditing vendor expenses. My invoice was flagged. I responded with uptime logs, performance metrics, error-free cycle counts, and a direct quote from Section 2.3, clear and simple. He didn't read it. Instead, he sent a follow-up asking what exactly they were paying for. That's when I knew this wasn't curiosity, it was intent. Soon after, a meeting invite landed in my inbox: process consolidation and vendor realignment. I didn't need an agenda to understand what that meant. Hunter thought he could take what I built, cut me out, and internalize the system without understanding it. He thought a title and a spreadsheet gave him leverage. The meeting was a Zoom call, just Hunter and 2 HR reps. No small talk. He launched straight into it, explaining they were internalizing core operations. Effective immediately, my contract was terminated. When he asked for a handover of all logic scripts, diagnostic interfaces, and source configurations, I asked him if he'd read Section 2.3. He hesitated, then claimed they paid for the system. I corrected him calmly. They paid for access, not ownership. I sent him a package I'd prepared earlier, a complete simulation model, full documentation, architecture diagrams. It looked legitimate because it was, but it wasn't connected to my servers. No live data, no control, just a shell. He scanned it, satisfied enough, and ended the call without another word. I stared at the black screen for a moment, the weight of the situation hanging in the air. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for Hunter, I knew it probably felt like it was. He thought he had what he needed. He thought he could run the system without me. He was wrong, and that was something he'd find out soon enough. I didn't stick around after the call ended. I needed to get out of the house, let my mind breathe. So I walked to the diner down the street. It was a small, run-down place with cracked vinyl booths and a heavy smell of grease that seemed to hang in the air no matter what time of day it was. I slid into a booth near the window, ordered black coffee, no sugar, no cream. I wasn't in the mood for niceties. While I waited for the coffee to hit the table, I pulled up my dashboard on my phone. The account was still there, Milner Freight, but not for long. I tapped through the menu and marked their account as access withdrawn. It wasn't a dramatic shutdown. It didn't flicker or send out alarms. I just stopped answering their requests. No more data, no more routing. They were on their own now. I took a sip of the coffee. It was too hot, burned my tongue, but I didn't care. The pain of it was nothing compared to what was coming for them. Within minutes, their handhelds, terminals, scanners, all the devices they relied on lost sync. The system was dead to them. Though they wouldn't know it immediately, the warehouse floor would still be buzzing with activity for a while. Forklifts, moving boxes, workers scanning orders, thinking everything was fine. But it wasn't. I didn't shut anything off. That wasn't the game I was playing. I just stopped answering. The routing timers I'd set up, the ones that kept things moving through the warehouse, ticked down to 0, slowly, methodically. The workers on the floor didn't know yet. They wouldn't for a while. The alarms didn't trigger immediately, but I could see it all from my end. The system was starting to choke. The boxes stopped moving, forklifts sat idle in front of conveyor belts, scanners beeped uselessly at empty slots, orders froze. I glanced down at my phone again, watched the uptime graph start to flatline. No more cycles, no more updates. A moment later, an auto-generated alert triggered on the dashboard. It was clean and simple. No drama. Just the truth. Routing controls currently under vendor custody per active agreement terms. That was it. I didn't need to check back for a while. I knew what was coming. They'd scramble, try to figure out why their systems had gone silent. They'd call, they'd panic, but I wasn't answering. Not this time. The quiet buzz of the diner felt like a world away as I sipped my coffee, letting it cool. My hands were steady, but my mind was already racing ahead. I could picture the chaos unfolding in that warehouse, the confusion, the frustration, the way Hunter and the rest of them would start throwing around blame and accusations. But they weren't going to fix it, not without me. I put my phone down and stared out the window at the street, the cars passing by, oblivious to what was happening just a few miles away. I wasn't worried, not yet, but I knew I would be hearing from them soon enough. The first email came in about 20 minutes after I marked their access withdrawn, then another and another. They started flooding in one after the other, panic in every word. Why is the system down? Where is the routing data? What the hell is going on? Hunter tried calling me. The first time, I let it ring out. The second time, I sent it straight to voicemail. By the third call, he'd left 3 voicemails in a row, his voice getting more and more desperate. I didn't listen to any of them. I knew what he was saying. He was begging for help, trying to figure out what went wrong. But he didn't deserve my attention. Not yet. The warehouse started reporting dead zones. The employees were getting confused, scanning items that weren't showing up on the system. Orders piled up. Forklifts sat still. Packages stacked high. The whole place was grinding to a halt. It was chaos. And that's when the customers started calling. I didn't pick up. I didn't need to. I already knew the story they'd tell. Their supply chain was now a logjam, and they had no clue how to get things moving again. I could hear the frustration in their voices, even through the email threads I was copying into my inbox. The real kicker came when the CEO of Milner Freight emailed me directly. I hadn't ever spoken to him before. I knew his name, but that was it. His email was short, almost too clean to be real. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled up my document folder and attached a clean one-page PDF, Emergency System Restoration Terms. It was simple, no fluff. The terms were crystal clear. The price? Double my usual annual fee. Payment up front, no exceptions. The kicker? Full buyout wasn't included. This was a lease. If they wanted control of the system, that had cost them. But for now, this was what they were getting, a lease, nothing more. I hit send and sat back, watching the clock tick. It didn't take long for their response to hit my inbox, but it wasn't the one I was hoping for. They didn't respond with an agreement. Instead, I got an email from their IT department. They tried rebuilding my system. They took the zip folder I'd sent and tried to plug it into their infrastructure. I don't know what they expected, but it was clear they had no idea what they were doing. The logs started coming in after about 10 minutes. Script errors, checksum mismatches, all kinds of failures. I opened the first few logs. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second. Then I typed up a quick reply. "No need to sugarcoat it. You didn't realize the repo has no live connectors. This is a simulation. You're not going to make it work without the actual system in my facility." They wouldn't get it. They were trying to play catch-up, trying to rebuild something they had no real understanding of. I didn't care to watch them fail. They'd figure it out soon enough, though. The clock was ticking, and I knew that they'd be back. Not with questions anymore, but with a check. Still, I wasn't worried. I had time. The Zoom invite came through not long after I sent the PDF. I opened it to find a meeting scheduled for 4:30 p.m. The CEO, the head of operations, their legal team, and of course, Hunter. They'd finally decided to talk. I could almost feel the desperation from their side of the screen as I clicked the link. I wasn't expecting pleasantries, and I didn't get them. The CEO, a guy named Greg, tried to keep things civil, but there was an edge to his voice. He wasn't stupid. He knew they'd screwed up. He wasn't just calling to yell. He needed something. He started. "Dana, we understand there's been some confusion here. We're trying to resolve this as quickly as possible." His tone was calm, like he thought that would smooth things over. Legal, sitting next to him, was already fidgeting with some papers. Her eyes flicked to the screen every now and then, but she was mostly scanning the contract. I could see it in her face when she spoke. "This fee you're asking for," she started, and then dropped the words like they were a weight. "It's completely unjustified. This doesn't reflect what we agreed on." I waited, letting her voice hang in the air, letting her believe I'd be swayed. But I wasn't. I leaned forward, flatly stating, "You unplugged the control panel. Now you want me to restart it. That's the fee." The CEO opened his mouth, probably to argue, but Hunter was sitting there like a deer caught in headlights, not saying a word. Not for the first time, I wondered how someone clearly out of his depth had gotten the position he had. He hadn't even opened his mouth yet, and he was already proving he didn't belong in the room. Greg cleared his throat. "We can't just accept these terms. It's a lot of money, Dana." Legal's eyes narrowed. "We'd like to suggest half up front, half after the system is restored. We need guarantees." I didn't blink. "That's not how this works." A pause. I could hear their wheels turning. Then finally, Greg leaned forward, his face tight. "Fine, but you have to understand, we're in a tough spot here. This system is critical to our operations." I sat back, letting the silence sit for a moment. Then I said flatly, "I'm not in the business of discounts. You want it back, you pay full amount up front. No exceptions." There was a beat, and then I saw them exchange looks. The legal team started whispering between themselves. It wasn't about negotiation anymore. It was about desperation. They needed the system. They knew it. Greg's voice finally broke the quiet. "Okay, we'll pay it." I didn't wait for them to say more. I clicked leave meeting and ended the call. I didn't need to hear anymore. 15 minutes later, my phone pinged. The wire transfer had gone through. I looked at the confirmation email. Full payment, just like I'd asked. I didn't waste any time. I opened up my terminal, connected to their network, and initiated the rerouting. It was a clean process, one I'd done 100 times, but this time felt different. I could feel the weight of the situation on the other side. Within 5 minutes, I saw the first signs of life. The status lights on their system blinked back on. The first scan came through, then another and another. Within 10 minutes, the conveyors were spinning again. The orders were moving like a pulse, returning to a body that had been lying still for too long. The heartbeat was back. I leaned back in my chair, watching the system come to life. It wasn't personal, it was just business, but it felt damn good to remind them who was in charge. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Hunter. It popped up in my LinkedIn notifications, a little too polished to be genuine. He'd sent me a message right after the transfer had gone through, probably hoping I wouldn't notice it until after the chaos settled. Tough day, learning experience for all of us. Would love to grab a virtual coffee sometime. I stared at it for a minute. I wasn't sure if I should laugh or roll my eyes. It wasn't a real apology, not even close, just a feeble attempt at smoothing over the wreckage. I marked it unread and moved on. The real kicker came the next morning. My inbox had a fresh email, this one from their VP. The subject line was blunt: Proposal Exclusive 5-year Retainer Agreement. I clicked it open, half expecting the same corporate spiel, but this time the terms were different. They'd gone all in. They were offering me a deal I couldn't ignore. The proposal was generous. On the surface, it looked like a win for them. A long-term retainer agreement, the kind of deal that would lock me in for years to come with a steady income stream. But the more I read, the more I saw the catch. Words like strategic partner and full-service exclusivity jumped out at me. They wanted to own my time, own my access, own my expertise. They wanted to lock me down. No more jumping between clients, no more flexibility. They were buying up my future. I knew exactly what they were after. I let the proposal sit there for a few minutes, thinking it over. Then I opened my contract editor and started making changes. First, I struck out the terms about shared IP and co-developed assets. That was a non-starter. I wasn't about to hand over my intellectual property for a promise of security. I added a clause for 90-day offboarding. If they wanted to end the relationship down the line, they'd have to pay out the full term, no questions asked. They'd have to buy their way out if they ever wanted to leave. Then I went for the big one. I added a clause about full payment up front every year. No more invoicing, no more delays. If they wanted my services, they'd pay in full before I lifted a finger. Finally, I took control of what mattered most to them, the routing protocols. I added absolute control to every clause concerning access. If they wanted me to handle their system, I was the gatekeeper. No more slipping through the cracks. I wasn't about to let them squeeze me dry again, thinking they could cut costs at my expense. When I was done, I reread the whole document. It was tighter, stronger, and in my favor. I hit send. Less than an hour later, I got a reply. They had accepted every single change. I wasn't surprised. After all, what choice did they have? They were back at square one, relying on me to keep their operation from falling apart. They needed me more than they needed them. And that's when I realized something. This wasn't just a business arrangement anymore. This was a power play. I had the leverage now, and I wasn't going to give it up. They had to crawl back to me. I smiled a little to myself as I closed the email. I had them exactly where I wanted them. A few weeks later, their new director of operations, not Hunter, who had been quietly relegated to special initiatives, reached out. His name was Alan, and he was a little more hands-on, a little more seasoned. He had a calm confidence about him, not the nervous desperation I'd seen in Hunter. Alan's first move, he asked me to create a course for their tech leads on infrastructure literacy. The tone of his message was respectful, and there was a hint of acknowledgement in it, like they knew they'd screwed up and now they wanted to make sure they never did again. It wasn't an apology, it was more like an offering. I agreed, of course, but at my hourly rate. No discounts. This was their lesson to learn, and I wasn't about to spoon-feed it for free. We scheduled a meeting, and when I logged on, I could tell Alan had briefed his team. They were all on camera, the tech leads, their eyes wide, probably trying to figure out how much they didn't know.
The room felt a little tense, but I didn't care. This was my space now. They were learning because I was teaching them. "All right," I said once we'd gotten the pleasantries out of the way. "This isn't a class on how to run a warehouse. It's a class on how your warehouse runs. There's a difference." I could see the gears turning. The tech leads sat up straighter. They were ready to listen. But I didn't pull punches. I laid it out for them, how everything in that warehouse was built on a system they had no real understanding of. They had scanners, terminals, and all kinds of fancy hardware, but without my control layer, none of it would work. And without understanding what made it tick, they were flying blind. I made them create a dependency list, which felt a little like dragging them through the mud, but they needed it. "What do you own?" I asked them. "What do you rent?" They all looked at each other like they hadn't really thought about it. Some of them were taking notes, others just staring at their screens, not sure where this was going. I let them fumble through it for a bit before I took over. "You own your forklifts and your scanners. You rent your software licenses and your hardware. But what do you actually depend on? What breaks when you pull the wrong plug?" I could see the light bulbs flicker. Alan was nodding along, but his eyes were focused on me now. He'd already figured out what I was getting at. I pulled up a simple chart. It wasn't flashy, just a list. At the top, bolded, was Reynolds Systems, ownership, external, function, primary routing and control, risk, complete operational failure. There was no need to explain it. They got it. I made them sit with that for a minute, let them stew. Alan cleared his throat. "So if we pull the plug on you," he started, but I cut him off. "If you ever pull the plug on me again, you're betting your whole operation on the idea that you can fix it yourself. And you can't. You're not set up to do that. Not now, not ever. You're lucky you got this far."
The room was quiet for a long time after that. Alan spoke first, his voice calmer than I expected. "We didn't fully understand the risks. We know that now." "Good," I said. "That's why we're here." We spent the next hour diving into the logistics, the processes, the vulnerabilities. I made them break down their dependencies, hardware, software, external vendors. They had no clue just how much of their operations were hanging by a thread until I showed them. By the end, I had them all writing down backup plans, contingencies for when things went wrong. They were asking questions now, not about how the system worked, but how they could stay working when everything around them broke. They hadn't gotten it before, but now they did. They saw the depth of their reliance on something they didn't control, something they didn't fully understand, and I wasn't going to let them forget it. As the meeting wrapped up, Alan looked at me with a little more respect in his eyes. "Thanks, Dana. This was exactly what we needed." I didn't smile. There was no need. The lesson had been taught. Whether or not they learned it was up to them. 3 weeks went by. Everything was running smoothly again. No drama, no more panicked emails or desperate phone calls. They were sticking to their end of the deal, paying on time, keeping their mouths shut. The system hummed along like it was supposed to, and I wasn't hearing from Milner unless it was in the form of a straightforward request or report. It was quiet, and I liked it that way. Then came the emails. 2 logistics companies, big ones. The kind that had worked with Milner reached out to me directly. They wanted to talk. They wanted to bring me in to handle their systems, their infrastructure. They'd heard about the work I'd done, and they were impressed. I could practically hear the desperation in their emails, even though the words were all polite. They needed someone who could fix their mess, make sure they weren't dependent on vendors who didn't get the job done right. I sat there for a minute, staring at the emails. I didn't respond. Not yet. I wasn't about to jump ship before the ink on my exclusive contract with Milner had even dried. The timing wasn't right. I had a few more months before I could entertain offers, and I wasn't about to take any risks. Instead, I opened a new document, Reynolds Systems Pricing Model V2. I stared at the blank screen for a second, then started typing. This time, everything would be prepaid. No more invoicing at the end of the year or giving anyone the chance to delay payment. I set a clear hourly rate for support, added a clause about emergency rates, and made it clear that no more friendly favors would be granted. If they wanted my time, they would pay for it upfront in full. No exceptions. I saved the document, sat back, and looked at my desk. My old mouse was still there, scratched up and worn. I hadn't realized how much it had become a part of my routine until now. When I saw how much the new one stood out, I ordered a high-end programmable mouse, something smooth, precise, worth every penny. It wasn't a souvenir, it was a tool, a small, expensive tool that signified the shift, a reminder that I wasn't here to be just another cog in the wheel. I'd made sure Milner understood the difference between cost and value. The mouse wasn't just for show, it was for when I made them pay for my expertise. They'd understand that soon enough. I never asked for applause. I didn't need to hear anyone clap for me, but I made damn sure they'd never forget who flipped the switch.